Because I have a background of fashion production and all of that, ended up being given the role of creative lead for the fashion show, which entailed leading a bunch of activities in making costume pieces. So I had to work with seamstresses, designers, and I had the privilege of working with very, very talented people that helped me to execute my vision for the fashion show, including Gabi, Paddy, Jesus, Cooper, and all these people are very talented and had pretty much more expertise in the fashion world because they went to school for it. I did not, so it was just, flowing as a natural. What I found so beautiful about this place, much as it's all about, happiness, but people were so used to having one form of happiness. And in Fire Island Pines, you get to choose your own adventure. That is the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen. There's people that are going to the beach, there's someone reading a book, there's someone having the best life in on a dance floor, like so many of my friends that I know, and there's me who sits in a corner, loves to watch people, and still has a lot of fun. There's so many beautiful stories about this place, but one that stands out for me is meeting people outside of their stature in society, outside of their job positions, outside of their fame, outside of their ambiguous way of living out in the straight world. This is a place where you meet someone that you absolutely have no idea who they are and connect with them so purely and genuinely without pretension. I've met judges, I've met police personnel, I've met DEAs, I've met people that have been, part of NASA projects, people that have been part of SpaceX. I'm very happy to get compliments about my fashion almost every day from different people, most especially from people that embody the true essence of fashion. One such person is Rob, who is always larger than life when it comes to fashion, and his opulence and elegance and all of that just ignites something in me that makes me want to live in a world of such opulence, and that's what I aspire to. So Fire Island just keeps you on your toes towards bettering yourself in whatever sphere you are acquainted with in life. It can be fashion, it can be medicine, it can be tech, it can be anything. And I can't wait to be, hopefully, the next wave of, designers that sprout from this place. Because, as you always know, there was Calvin Klein, there was Halston, and quite a few others that, made this their home during their time and harnessed the power of creativity, the power that sprouts from the nature in this place to kind of stay creative and build their brands and spread out all over the world. I see Fire Island as a trendsetter for big fashion lines, fashion houses. I mean, just for our fashion show, Fashion of the Pines, I saw quite some big designers that were seated watching the show, that came and filmed the show, that came and, what most importantly, inspired to create our next collections.
My name is Rob Levy. People out here know me as Dr. Rob. I've been coming out here for 34 consecutive summers, and it's been an organizing principle of my life. I can't imagine what I would do if I didn't spend summers in Fire Island. I think in general, Fire Island gives us a freedom that we may not have in our day-to-day lives, even in a relatively progressive place like New York City, where the majority of the Fire Island summer community lives. It is not a place where we can necessarily express our most creative or at times transgressive selves, and Fire Island gives that freedom. It's been a place that's nurtured all sorts of cultural events. There's theater, there's music, there's fashion that really has its genesis in Fire Island, and it's a place that continues to evolve creatively. So the sense of style and fashion and artistic expression has changed a great deal in the decades. Some of that change also reflecting the changing history of the community, the AIDS epidemic, the implications that had, and then the relative salvation that came from finally treatments for HIV. I'm not sure that my particular sense has evolved. I've had a very specific look and sensibility that was informed by my time living in London in the early 80s and by the sensibility of New Romantics and the first generation English dance music and the nightclub world in London, which I worked in during the time I took off between college and med school. So I've basically kind of built on that infrastructure. It's been something very personal to me. But I've seen kind of the overall aesthetic of the island morph through many iterations. There were periods where it was in the doldrums. There was a look that I referred to as the Aber-zombies, when it seemed like everyone was in Abercrombie and Fitch. But prior to that, there was this wonderful flowering of color and fashion creativity. And luckily, as our community has healed from some of the wounds of the 80s and 90s, that has come back. And the newer generation of Fire Island seems to really appreciate the fantasy, the costume, that is actually the true legacy of Fire Island Pines. I think that some of my sensibility was reflected in the party that I began and hosted for many years called Independence, which was the large Fire Island 4th of July benefit dance party. And we always had themes and costumes, and it basically kind of channeled, in some ways, in my mind, a spirit of what London was like and what Suzanne Barsh's parties were like in New York. So we always felt like we were trying to bring a bit of that to the island, and people were tremendously creative. Outfits were glamorous or hysterically funny. And I think that it also creates a different atmosphere when people choose to do that, which is a wonderful icebreaker. And I think it allows very different sorts of people to approach each other and start chatting. And it creates a very friendly and inclusive environment, which I think is part of the point. There was also one kind of amusing little story from many years ago. There were two parties on one weekend that my particular posse was going to. The first was called Prozac and Plastic Surgery, Look Good or Feel Good, and the second was called Sheer. So we dressed for the Sheer party, and I was virtually naked with kind of major necklace and headdress, heels, a barely visible G-string, and then I was gift wrapped in a giant clear plastic kind of painter's drop cloth. And we were walking across the island, and I was in that outfit, and we passed a family with relatively small children, and one of the children had a completely horrified look at my outfit, and one of my friends looked at the child and said, "Scary, huh?" And the child said, "Yes, very." And I said, "I'm being dissed by a 7-year-old," and the child then proceeded to say, "I'm 6." So that was just very emblematic of the different worlds that collide in Fire Island.
I'm Bob Levine. I am known on Fire Island as Rose Levine. I live in New York, and I also have a house in Cherry Grove. I arrived on July 9th, 1955, and I went to Cherry Grove. The Pines was here, but not popular. I mean, there was just a few houses and mostly families that lived here. And I did come to the Pines in '56 because I knew someone that lived here from New York, and so I've been coming to the Pines regularly. I went to a party and I saw people. The first night I came here, then the next night I went to a show. They have shows in Cherry Grove, and they have a theater there since 1948. And I saw all the people on stage that were at the party, so I wanted to do the same thing. So I said, how do I get into a show? Well, 3 weeks later, they had another show. They used to do 3 shows per season. We had a live piano player. There wasn't a lip sync, or there wasn't recordings. It was just fun. And it was a full evening of skits and songs. And we had a lot of people at that time from Broadway. They were directors, they were choreographers, they were actual performers on Broadway. So if they were here, they would coordinate the shows, and it was all rehearsed. It wasn't just get up and do it. So it was a fabulous review that they had in those days.
So you started performing?
Started to perform, and the first show I was in a chorus, and I did something funny, and so then the second show they gave me a song, and then the next year I was already singing solo, and one of the guys from Martin Kraft, he gave me a song, Rose of Washington Square, and he changed the name to Rose of Cherry Grove Fame, and that's been my kind of a theme song for me, you know. There was always a group of artistic people that are gay, and even when we had the parties, people dressed differently than they did, with more of a costume, and that's how all these trends started in the Grove and the Pines, fashion trends. Jeans started in the Pines or the Grove, and then they beaded them in jackets with beads or denim jackets, and I was a buyer, and we bought it for serious stores. They bought it. It wasn't just show clothes on the island. It was bought for serious stores all over the country. In the 70s, there was an expression where people, they were clones. They wore these shirt that I'm wearing now, like a polo shirt. And I love these polo shirts, and that's the look that everybody wore. So I did a show, the first show in the Pines in 1981, and I called it Rose in the Pines, and my poster was me and wearing a Lacoste shirt with the alligator on it. That's what the look was here. I don't remember what year. It was in the mid-70s. They had all designers that lived in the Pines and Water Island. They had Perry Ellis, Kathy Hardwick, Jeffrey Bean, Michael Volbrecht, Tracy Mills, and they all had a showroom on 7th Avenue, and I was a buyer, so I bought those kind of clothes for my stores because I always had high-end stores, and I was always involved with those kind of designer and people like that.
My name is Iman Luker, and I'm the founder of Trans Cecilias. Which we relocate trans people are facing persecution around the world to go to safer European countries or North America. It's very personal to me, Fire Island. I found my fashion, my self-expression. I used to have a store and I used to live here, so I've been here for like the past 12 years. I found my refuge as a trans woman. I start my transition here after the AIDS crisis. That used to be the fashion of the Pines. But to bring that back is really incredible. I feel really impressed and amazing. And I feel the island is more diverse now, and they're welcoming so many people. And seeing people wearing clothes and wearing fashion express themselves the way they want it. It really opened doors for other people because, as we know, Fire Island, it's a safe haven. But also for me, it's a place when you find your own fashion. It really opened doors for you, and you connect with people, and you feel free. The day that I moved here, I moved from Egypt in a political asylum as a refugee and immigrant from Egypt to have a place that just can, give me that sense of stability and sense of like, oh my God, I feel free. Nobody told me that. It's just you feel it. You just like you get out of the boat, you feel that way. You feel like, oh my God, everybody's saying hello to you. People are really welcoming, and it's really beautiful.
My name is Eric Sawyer. I've been coming to the Pines for more than 40 years. My first trip here was in 1975. I started doing shares in the mid-'80s. In the 70s, 60s, and 70s, this was a place where people could come and, not be, a straight white male with a, station wagon and a picket fence. And so, lots of people were very campy and very dramatic. In the 70s, there was this whole macho man with the village people, and there was this kind of movement away from the image of gay men as hairdressers and florists, and so the butch drag came into play in the period since then. There have been varying evolutions, but I think we're back now to a period of more free expression and do whatever the hell you want, wear what you want, who cares what your gender identity is, or how you present how you feel you are. I'm one of the founding members of ACT UP New York. It's an activist organization that was founded in 1987 to try to force the government to develop treatments and a cure for AIDS. The government had no sense of urgency, and so we literally had to take to the streets and fuck up business as usual and embarrass the government and drug companies into trying to find treatments and cures for HIV and ways to care for people as they were dying. I think one of the ACT UP actions that most impacts me emotionally, but I'm most proud of, were Ashes Action. Here is a picture of me carrying the ashes of Larry Kert. Larry Kert was the original Tony on West Side Story, and he had sung at the White House at state dinners at every president, starting with Eisenhower. And he was dying of AIDS, was very frail, had Kaposi sarcoma. They didn't know that. They invited him to the White House to sing with Carol Lawrence during Bush Sr.'s administration. And when they saw how sick he looked, and when they got wind of the fact that he planned to say before he sang that he was dying of AIDS and that President Bush needed to spend more money to find cures for people with AIDS, they yanked him from the lineup. They said, "We don't have your music. You can't go on." And we know Carol Lawrence's solo from West Side Story. The accompanist knows it by heart. She'll go on. And Larry was so devastated that he went home, developed pneumonia within 2 weeks, and died shortly thereafter. When we started planning for the Ashes Action, his lover, Ron Pullen, heard we were going to do it, and he told me that he still had Larry's ashes and asked me would I give Larry his final performance at the White House that President Bush administration had denied him. And so that's what we did. We carried his ashes and dumped them on the White House lawn. in the 80s, when ACT UP became very popular, T-shirts like this, was our uniform. This was our brand, and we had lots of messaging on T-shirts, including things about drug use. But everybody wore black jeans. Everybody wore Doc Martens. Everyone wore black leather bomber jackets or motorcycle jackets, and that activist drag was kind of what everybody who was an activist wore in the late 80s through the 90s. I think that still is true. ACT UP messaging still is something that's quite popular. There are groups like Prep for All that has messaging around Prep for All about transphobia, about homophobia, about decriminalizing sex work, about decriminalizing drug use. I think, if anything, what we've done is we've adopted our messaging into fashion statements. Well, I think one thing that's really important to me, and why I feel Fire Island is my home, and why it's so important, is that it really is kind of a gay heaven. It's a queer majority community where everyone takes care of each other. Many of the most important AIDS and gay rights organizations were founded in the Pines, or were founded by board members or activists that come here, that live here, that rent here. And I think Fire Island remains the spiritual center of not only New York but gay America. And I think it needs to be preserved as a queer community because of that role.
My name is Madame Vivian V. Everyone just calls me Viv. I first came to Fire Island in 2012. I took a day trip with my friend, Gordon. And I remember it feeling like that scene in Wicked when Elphaba goes to the Emerald City and she feels, for lack of a better word, normal because no one's staring at her because they all have the green glasses, so they think everything looks green. And I remember feeling completely safe. And so I've been coming to the island ever since then. My connection to Fire Island of late has been I perform in the Pines Party halftime show, which is this huge, extravagant event, like the Fashion of the Pines event, an all-night dance party on the beach. Years later, I met the producers of the Pines Party in Mexico, because gay world is so small. We find these little hubs, these little areas, and we gather. And we became friends, and they asked me if I wanted to be in it. And it was a true dream come true last year. Everything that I was told to hide is completely celebrated out here. And I see that with a lot of my friends. And so when people come out here in their style, you see them express themselves to their absolute fullest. And it's a really beautiful thing.